this evening. In the role of field crop specialist, I worked mainly with corn, soybeans, wheat, dry beans, and sugar beet growers, as well as hemp producers. And then also I grew up on a small farm just north of Lansing around the St. John's area that I still help with and attempt to help with technology there as best I can. Our goal of the Hitching Post is to bring together Michigan Farm Bureau staff, industry professionals, and members all into your home, your farm shop, or your tractor, wherever you are each month, and allow you to hear what's going on out there firsthand with policy, commodities, markets, and other issue updates. Feel free to submit any questions that you'd like our panel to answer using the Q&A box, and we will try our best to get those into the conversation. We are recording today's Hitching Post, so if you want to go back and re-listen or share this video with others, the link will be available this coming Thursday on both the Michigan Farm Bureau Facebook page and on our Michigan Farm Bureau YouTube page. Joining me today as panelists, we have Allison Eicher, Michigan Farm Bureau's Assistant Legal Counsel, and Mike Houghtaling, President and General Manager of P&C Ag Solutions. So to kick things off, why don't you guys introduce yourself? Allison, do you want to go first?
Certainly. Can you hear me okay? Thanks. I've learned in this day and age you have to confirm that because I'm likely to have my mic still muted. So thank you, Theresa, for this opportunity to talk tonight. As Theresa said, I'm the Assistant General Counsel at Michigan Farm Bureau for the family of companies. So what does that mean? Well, I'm one of the lawyers that goes out and represents us in the countryside and tries to advise our members on, a myriad of legal issues, as well as the companies themselves. A little bit of my background. I'm a Michigan State grad twice over and married to a farmer in Shiawassee County. We have corn, soys, sugar beets, and then he also does some custom app work. So I can't say that I grew up on a farm, but I've been involved and married into it for about 20 years now. So.
Thanks, Allison. Mike, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
Yep. I'm Mike Houghtaling. I grew up in Reese, Michigan. So I grew up on a farm and went to Michigan State, got a degree in crops and soil science and ag business management. The farm, my dad and uncle, and quickly noticed a real lack of leadership. Ag Technology Consulting. So I started P&C Ag 20 years ago in 2000, actually January of 2001, so 19 years ago. And our focus was then and still is really to partner with growers to make their farm operation and their life better, whether it's increased profitability, increase productivity, or just make work easier, make it a little more fun. So we focused on selling and servicing technologies that meet those criteria. We've grown our business from just myself in my garage to now there's like 6 employees, and we cover pretty much the entire state of Michigan and consult with guys all over the country, really. There's not a lot of places we don't get our fingers in. And I'll travel most of the winter doing speaking engagements and working with growers all over the place. So it's really a passion of mine. I also farm full-time with my brother, my dad and uncle, and a couple longtime employees. Really, agriculture is my passion. So that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Mike. I guess let's dive right into our discussion. So kind of one of the first topics I'd really like us to talk about is if you could touch on what you think some of the risks as well as the rewards are of using new technology, especially when we talk about big data. So looking at that technology that gathers data from your farm. So kind of what are those risks and rewards? And Mike, do you want to touch on that first?
So risks and rewards. So I'm generally of the opinion that the risks are not as great. That a lot of the perceived risk, we hear about it all the time. You know, somebody's going to take my information, take my data, and use it against me. And there's some truth to that. Definitely, there's a lot of venture capital firms trying to leverage algorithms and things that they developed in other industries. An example I use all the time is Moneyball. So if you know, Oakland Athletics, one of the lowest paid teams in baseball, but yet had a huge winning record in the 90s. Great movie. Billy Beane took data and leveraged it to make better decisions. So we've seen that across all kinds of industries, and there's a lot of money chasing that in agriculture, and there's some real merit to it. And we see firms like Indigo Ag and FBN, and just recently Tillable now, you know, wanting to use that data maybe against us. So a lot of growers, the big fear is, I don't want to give up my data. I don't want my neighbors to know what I'm doing. I don't want my retailers, people I'm buying products from or people I'm selling products from, to know intimately about my business. And I kind of brush off a lot of those fears. There's definitely something to it, but I think the rewards can far outweigh the risk of any of those things happening. We're seeing guys make great decisions with the data they're gathering from their machinery. And the world we're in right now, the technology is mature enough that we can gather great data sets and do some analysis and help growers make really big decisions that impact their bottom line, future growth of their farm. So whenever I start talking with growers about the risk versus reward, I quickly remind them, you know, that these people aren't that interested in your data. You think your data is really that special? It's special to you for your farm. If you use it properly, you can make some great decisions for your farm. But to be scared that people are going to leverage it against you, really, I think it's unfounded today. Maybe that changes sometime down the road, but today I think it's quite unfounded. So that's my opinion.
I think those are some really good points. I think one of the things that we've seen, even on our farm, is just bringing in technology brings in the younger generation too. You know, it's one of the things my sister and I are more involved with the tech piece than what my dad is, because my dad's like, I just want to run the tractor and I want the technology to work. You guys make it work. I think another reward is just coming up with cool ideas on how to use it. You know, this spring in this area, there was a lot of people that, you know, we hear about using drones to do mapping and try and look at growing crops. Well, we had a lot of people this spring that used it to try and find tile lines to figure out, you know, where they had tile problems or where did they maybe need to put in new tile. And that's stuff that you don't necessarily hear about, but it is one of those rewards of having some of that technology put into the farm. Allison, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think you guys cover it really well. And, you know, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about how farmers can go about protecting their data. And that's, you know, and that's really the important part. But I think, I mean, there's risk and reward in everything, right? I mean, I think as farmers, we all know that, and we live that. And Mike made a good point. You know, your specific data is really important to you. But really the value in the data to the public is in the aggregate. So it's everybody's data, it's your neighbor's data, and not just specifically yours. It's, you know, it's not just the numbers from your farm. The value comes in knowing what else is going on, you know, in your county, in your state, in the country. So I think asking questions, feeling comfortable, and ask the questions, understand, you know, from your provider what the risks are related to your data. Because certainly they can tell you what the rewards are. And the rewards are, you know, hopefully, you know, better use of pesticides, fertilizers, understanding, your soil better so that you can, yield more. So it's just that balancing act. And I think as time goes on, we'll also have a better understanding of what those rewards really are. A few years ago, we were collecting data and it was kind of data for data's sake. But now, the companies are better learning how to use that data to provide the farmers and the industry more rewards on the whole.
And you mentioned that privacy piece and kind of the rights that farmers have. Can you touch on that a little bit from sort of the legal aspect of what are farmers' rights with their data? What sort of privacy rights do they have? How are they protected? What's some of that information that you can share?
So, privacy, I think for everybody is a really huge issue, right? And there's certain data that I think we're all familiar with that's going to be protected. My social security number, my personally identifiable information. We know that that's going to be protected by law. However, courts have come through and looked at data from farms, and they haven't been willing to give that same level of privacy or, that status to that information. But that doesn't mean that you can't protect your data. You should be reviewing the contracts that you receive from these service providers and asking questions, reviewing them carefully to look for who owns your data, what information is shared, what information goes to the cloud. Everybody's gonna have a different level of comfort with what information is out there, but it's on you, the grower, to ask the questions and review the contract language, and then talk to a legal professional, a legal counsel, preferably somebody with an ag background, who can review it and talk through those things with you. But because the law itself isn't going to protect you, you have to have a sound contract in place to provide those protections for you.
Mike, from a service provider standpoint, do you have anything you want to add on some of those rights and data privacy and how you work with farmers on some of those issues?
Not really. Allison pretty much summed it up. As a provider, a lot of times I'll house your data, but it's your data. I'm not going to give it to anybody without your permission. And I think it's common sense. I'm not going to jeopardize my reputation and our brand just to give your data to somebody else. It doesn't make any sense. And we house a lot of data, and guys trust us, I guess. So not really anything to add. When guys give me a data card, they're giving it to me because they want me to give them something in return. And they trust that I'll house it. We really stress with our customer base to protect your data from loss more than anything. The biggest threat isn't that somebody's going to steal your data. The biggest threat is that you're going to actually just lose it. You put it on that computer, and I've got customers that started mapping yields, doing yield mapping and vertebrate scripts in the 90s, and they're like, oh well, 95 computer.
Looks like we might have lost Mike. Hopefully he can get back in. Are you still there, Mike? We'll just keep going. Hopefully Mike can get back in to join us. If anyone does have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. And I guess sort of one question that I do have is how or what, especially, and Allison, you could kind of touch this from the legal perspective, but if a farmer is using multiple technology providers, so say they're using John Deere and they're using Ag Leader and maybe Trimble, something along those lines, what should they do to make sure that they can have all their stuff talk to each other? Or are there legal things that they can do to help it so that they can access all of their data if they're using different platforms?
So that's a really hard question. So thank you. So I'm going to take it out into some pieces first. Because one, you know, you can contract for these types of things, right? So if you have Ag Leader and you have John Deere, you can attempt to contract, but, the service providers may not be willing, to allow that information to be shared between the systems. But you can contract for that and you can ask those questions. And as a consumer looking at these products, those would be questions that I would recommend that you ask is, I have John Deere already over here. I'm looking at Ag Leader. How can those two things, communicate? And perhaps that goes into your buying decision. Another thing to consider related to that is, perhaps you've got, and I think Mike was kind of going down this road a little bit, with older data or legacy systems. A question that you want to know is who owns that data, and then can I import that data into future systems? Because you don't want to lose that. You want to be able, you gain a lot of knowledge being able to look back historically at what your yields have been, or what your application rates have been in the past, what the soil conditions were, what the precipitation was. That's all information that can be helpful historically for you to make future decisions. So you don't want to find out that, you've been using one system for 5 years and, if you leave or go with something new that you're going to lose it. But it's asking questions and it's knowing that you need to ask those questions. I think the younger generation may be more accustomed to that because, we've grown up with cell phones and updating our computers, in our personal lives. So it's easier for us to apply out in the field. So I think asking the questions, and these questions aren't a shock. I mean, these service providers know that these are going to be questions that you're going to be asking. And then you just have to contract or negotiate for those.
Thanks for that. I guess one thing I kind of want to touch on a little bit is we are Michigan Farm Bureau. We're a grassroots membership organization. Our members set policy, and we kind of, as employees of Farm Bureau, we work from that policy. So I just wanted to mention, we have a pretty robust policy on drones. In our book, in the American Farm Bureau book, they're called unmanned aircraft systems. So we do have a lot of policy on that. And probably one of the bigger policy topics I think that's come up in the last few years is actually right to repair on farm machinery. So, John Deere can't trying to get policy put in place so that you could actually get the codes out of your tractor if you needed to repair it, or you could repair it yourself, get the, look up the manual and do it without having to go directly to your John Deere dealer. So those are some other things that we have in policy that really relate to data and to technology as a whole. And there is an entire policy on that proprietary data piece that we've been talking about. So I think if there's questions on where does Farm Bureau stand, or what do we believe on some of that, if people just look to either Michigan Farm Bureau's policy book or American Farm Bureau's policy book, you can get a good idea of where we're at on some of those. And with it being our policy, it's always available to change from, if members want to change it, they can do that. That's kind of why we're a membership organization. It looks like we have Mike has been able to join us again. Mike, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I don't know. My app froze up and crashed.
Well, yep. I threw Allison a curveball while you were gone, so I guess I'll pitch it to you now too. Of really, what should farmers do to make sure they have access to their data if they're using multiple platforms or they're using legacy platforms? So say they're using Ag Leader, a John Deere, and a Trimble. You've got every platform under the sun. How can they make sure that they can access all that data, and what can they do to get all that data to talk to each other?
That's where partners like me really come in. That's our specialization, is to try to put all those puzzle pieces together. There's several platforms that play with all colors. Just got to choose which one you're gonna work with. Whether it's Ops Center. So if you want to go with John Deere Ops Center, it works great for all John Deere stuff. But if you've got Case or Ag Leader or Trimble or other data, you really need a good partner you can trust like us to help you get that data in. And it can come in. There's drawbacks to Ops Center versus, say, Ag Leader's SMS or FieldView. There's about a half a dozen platforms out there, and they all have their pluses and minuses. And that's where we try to help guys understand, yeah, this is a better fit versus that one. The hard part is once you pick the team you're going to go with, you're stuck with that team. I mean, you get in deep and it's hard to ever change. And that's quite honestly what the vendors want. That's what John Deere wants. They want, once you're in, they got you for life. You're captive. And there's a huge amount of truth to it. I've got growers that have been with, say, FieldView for 7-8 years now, and they're not switching. They'd love to switch, but it's too big of a task. And we've worked with some guys to switch platforms. It's a big deal and it's not fun, but it's doable. So there's my 2 cents.
We're getting a little close to our ending, and again, if people have questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. I guess what do you see as kind of the next new thing? You know, drones were the big flashy thing for a while. We've talked autonomous tractors have been kind of talked about a little bit. Is there some new technology out there you think that's maybe new, sort of far out stuff, and then stuff that you think is going to start to be used more heavily? Mike, if you want to start, since you're kind of our tech guru here.
So yeah, drones, that was a couple of years ago. We dove in pretty deep with drones. Autonomous vehicles. We've got a fully autonomous tractor on our farm that we were running today. I mean, that's here. The guy wants to buy it, I'll sell you one today. Where does that go? I think really that's the next step, is fully unmanned vehicles doing operations that become ubiquitous. I'm not sure when we get there, but we're well on the way. You know, drones was a flashy piece of technology, but it was a product looking for a purpose. And the self-driving machinery, self-adjusting, these robots, I really just throw it as a general category of robots. There's a problem that these are fulfilling. And the biggest problem most all growers I work with face is we can't find any help. I can't find enough help. I can't find people that want to show up. I can't find people that want to work the long hours I need them to work. I can't find people that'll work for the pay I want to pay them. I just can't find the people. But we still have farms consolidating. That's not going to stop. We still have larger and larger acres to work in a day. So we're going to see unmanned vehicles. It's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen really quite quickly in the next 3 years. There's just a boatload of companies chasing this market. Last count, we had about 52 different companies wanting to work with us to do development. I mean, there's just a ton of money chasing this. Most of them are still hush hush quiet, not really getting out in the public's eye. Raven acquired 2 companies last year, and Raven's a big player, established player, and they went out and spent a pretty good chunk of money to acquire a couple of startups. There's a ton of other startups. They're all trying to get their product perfected, and really the biggest thing I see is they're all struggling to understand how to come to market, because they're not traditionally agricultural players. They're all these small startup companies that don't really know anything about ag. They know a lot about robotics. They don't really know anything about ag. So we're trying to partner with them and bring their products to market. I give a discussion every, one of in my toolbox of PowerPoints discussions is what does ag look like in 10 years? And autonomy is one. Big data is another. I harp on big data, but I think that's the next thing that growers aren't really leveraging their data, but they're going to be forced to lever that data harder. And if growers can be freed up by unmanned vehicles, if the sprayer's out spraying, they're going to have time to spend analyzing drone imagery or soil tests or harvest maps. They're gonna have more time to do that. Right now, most guys are so strapped with time, they don't have time to harness the technology that they've adopted. Does that make sense?
That does. And you kind of touched a little bit on, working with tech startups that maybe don't have a background in ag. And that sort of goes into a little bit of question of what sort of training or schooling should a person go into or look at if they want to work for a company like yours or another ag tech provider?
That's a good question. We get quite a lot. We try to get a couple interns from Michigan State every year, wherever. And quite honestly, I'm 40 now. When I was growing up, you had to go to college. You got to go to college. You got to get formally trained. You have to do this. And I'm here to tell you, the guys that I'm looking to hire, I could care less what their formal training is. I want to train them. I want somebody that's ambitious and willing to learn. And the old adage is, if you can make it through college, that means you're teachable, that you can learn. So that's definitely a thing. Right now, I don't know that there's, Michigan State's got a great ag tech program they got some great teachers, great emphasis, but the speed with which things are moving, they'll never keep up. And I think most guys that work in the high tech ag industry are going to have to be trained on the job and learn as they go. Because quite honestly, I'm relearning almost on a monthly basis. We're having to relearn the tech stuff. Really comes down to, are you smart enough to learn a new trick constantly? Are you smart enough? Are you humble enough to ask silly, stupid questions? You got to have a desire to learn. And that's how we've tried to staff our company, is with people that aren't afraid to say, oh, that's new, I was wrong. Or, that'll never happen. Oh, I was wrong. Yeah, it will. People are willing to learn on the job. And there's a lot of companies like ours looking for young people, old people, whoever. Just people are hungry to learn, hungry to be on that cutting edge, hungry to make mistakes, get their feet wet and hands dirty. So that's what we're looking for. And I'm looking for people to hire all the time. I could hire 2 or 3 people easy if they fit those criteria.
So we've had a couple questions come in from viewers. One of those is, how do you see technology economizing to scale to allow smaller producers to use some of these as economically viable solutions? Currently, so much of it is, to get some of this technology, you have to be so large to make it economically viable. But how do you see it kind of transitioning so that smaller producers can do that?
Oh, I can feel that. So that's a topic that comes up often in our winter meeting series, that how does, guys say, well, I'm too small, I can't afford that technology. The autonomous tractor we're running, it's a $65,000 investment. It's not cheap. But what I think is going to happen, and this is my future cast, what I think is going to happen is technology is actually going to make farms get smaller again. It's going to put small farms at a big advantage, because we don't have to be out doing the work. Technology always gets cheaper. We've seen computers that cost tens of thousands of dollars become thousands of dollars, become hundreds of dollars. And what we're going to see in autonomy and robotics is that cost gets driven to almost zero. I think the cost isn't going to be the hardware, it's going to be the service. The cost is going to be, who can I hire to make this thing work? Who can I hire to make these pieces fit? That's our opinion, but I think that we're going to see farm size stabilize, and maybe even give smaller operators an edge, that they can focus on things like marketing instead of focusing completely on labor tasks. Instead of out cultivating, a small grower can switch to organic, capture a market premium, and not have to do the grind of weed control through, sitting on a tractor day after day, grinding it out. We can have a robot that goes out and takes care of those weeds. We can have satellite imagery to tell us via our smartphone when we've got an insect problem. I think we're going to see absentee, the absentee landowner might become an absentee farm operator. That we don't even really need to be present on the farm to grow a crop. It's kind of a far out there idea. I get stones thrown at me a few times in the winter when I talk about this, but I think there's a lot of desire for smaller operators continue operating and not grow their farm, not to go spend ridiculous sums of money on more land. And I think technology can make that happen. Does that sort of answer that question? I kind of got off track.
Yeah, I think that does. Allison, do you have anything you want to add on any of these? I kind of been skipping over you on some of these questions. Sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, I love this stuff. I haven't been a lawyer all my life. My degree's in supply chain management, and I've worked in manufacturing before law school, and this stuff, like, I just love this stuff. So, I mean, and I love it when people don't have legal issues, right? That makes my day. So no, I'm fascinated with what Mike has to say and how he envisions, the future. Because I think we've all been talking about, the demise of the family farm. That's something that we hear frequently, and I think it's sad for us, family farmers. So I think that's a great future.
It's all about that economy of scale, and I think technology really disrupts the economies of scale. Instead of having, I say, you keep getting bigger planters, bigger combines, bigger tractors, bigger, so you can leverage that economy of scale. And, we've got customers with 48 row, 54 row, 72 row planters, these huge planters, so they can cover more acres, so they can farm more acres, so their margins keep getting smaller and smaller. But then we introduce something like a 1-row robotic planter that can just run 24 hours a day, and we only buy as many as we need, and they cost virtually nothing. So that just monkey wrenches that entire economy of scale discussion. And so that's what I think is really cool. I did maybe have a question for Allison. Are you hearing anything on legal issues of fully autonomous vehicles? Are you fielding any questions of those natures?
So we haven't yet, although a conversation such as this might start prompting them. So I might have to shift my work over. So I've only been at Farm Bureau for a year, and prior to that, I worked at MSU Law, and I was really involved in legal tech and talking about how technology is changing, including autonomous vehicles. And I think right now academia is struggling with those issues, and I think we're going to get a lot of ideas from there. I think the law has to catch up with this technology. Law is slow to move and respond. So although we're not fielding those questions yet, I anticipate it, especially as our farms switch to using more and more of this technology. As it becomes more commonplace, our farmers are going to be coming to us with more of these questions. So more to come, I suspect, and it'll be me who's doing the search. So.
Looks like we've got time for one more question. We might be able to get through two. We'll see how this goes. But the next one is, what are some of the pros and cons to using other cloud-based management systems? So like Farmer's Edge, Farmlog, some of those, rather than just using like a John Deere technology. And are there ways for them to sync to other systems? You'd kind of talked about when I'd mentioned Trimble and a Ag Leader and a John Deere, getting them to talk. But what about if you use some of these other systems like a Farmer's Edge or a Farmlogs?
So
Throw it to you again.
there's a ton of them out there, and I hate to throw stones, but there's a lot of them that are just chasing venture capital money. And I'm going to pick on farm logs. They kind of got a cool little product, but their sole mission, I think, or what is or was to get venture capital money, and then we'll develop the product further. And they've gotten a ton of money, but Farmer's Edge really started out as a consulting company, and they went after venture capital money. They're kind of companies that started up in order, their product was really secondary to their quest for funding so they could build a product. And we've worked with several of them. Farm Logs was up here once, and I don't want to pick on them, but they came to our place and they wanted to shoot a video on how they were using the software to send scripts. And I had a couple questions for them. They were more interested in making a video than they were about answering the questions. There's some other ones chasing. Generally, what we've seen is they don't have their stuff together yet. I'm trying to think of the other one. Not Farmer's Edge. There's another one that uses a puck similar to what Farmer's Edge is using. And they're collecting data and then storing it on their cloud, so then you could export it to other companies' clouds. I really tend to tell guys there's the big three, stick with one of the big three. But that's my opinion. I don't really like throwing stones at companies, but I wouldn't recommend any of my clients work with Farm Logs or Farmer's Edge, either of those two. What's the other one? I should know this because I'm friends with the CEO. They sell a puck too that you plug into a CAN bus and it records the data. Their mission is a little bit different. They want to sell your data for you to food companies and different things like that. But a lot of these, besides John Deere, besides Aglear, besides FieldView, they're just trying to build a product so they can sell their company.
That's really interesting. We do have time for one more question. So this one is again on data, but a little different take of how do you see farmers capitalizing on their data and using it through blockchain? So how, as we move into blockchain technology, how do we see farmers using their data for that? And Mike, I really hope you're still there for this one.
I'm hoping so too, because although I'm familiar with blockchain and I teach it in the law classes that I teach at the law school still, I've only talked about it in terms of, really the food supply chain, especially as it relates to traceability. So I really am interested in what Mike can share related to how farmers are using it in their equipment. Like the Walmart mango case study where they're talking about how they trace it from, farm to fork. I'm always very curious as to how it actually works on the field, instead of just, anecdotally.
So here's the dirty secret, is that it's just a catchword. It's just a phrase right now that's really meant to pique the interest of the consumer or the venture capital guy that's trying to fund. Farm Mobile is one that's really pushing to try to get a blockchain type of identity preservation. Indigo Ag also is, but when you really look under the hood of everything, they're not really using blockchain yet. They're all talking about it, and it makes good sense to use blockchain so that the identity is preserved and it can't be falsified or faked. But at this point, I don't. The few of the food companies that we work with, they only care about being able to say, yeah, we're doing that. They only care about, we want to check that box. And they think the consumer wants that box checked. So they can print whatever on their label, whether it's a jug of orange juice or a bag of sugar or a jar of pickles or whatever it is. They just want to be able to say, yep, because some focus groups said that's important to consumers. But right now, Indigo Ag, Farm Mobile, they're really the only ones chasing that. And they're really in the infancy of developing it. I was on a call the other day with Farm Mobile. They're looking for food companies to partner with to try and sell this idea to. It's not the other way around. The food companies aren't calling up growers and saying, hey, how can you identity preserve this? Most of the food processors, honestly, I don't think want anything to do with it.
Well, thank you. That was great. And that is all we have time for tonight. So I want to thank both Allison and Mike for joining us as a part of this edition of the Hitching Post. And remember to all of our watchers that we do have a video of tonight's event. It'll be put up on our Facebook page by this Thursday. So feel free to share that within all of your networks. And while you're on that Michigan Farm Bureau Facebook page, make sure to go to our event section and you can sign up for the September Hitching Post, which will be with John Cran, who's our National Legislative Counsel, and he's going to have a panel to talk about international trade. And one last note, we would love your feedback on this event. So you'll be getting a survey once you leave, and you'll also be directed to our public policy website, which is a great place to catch up on the latest regarding policy and politics in agriculture. You can also view those policy books if you're interested in some of the policies that I talked about related to data and technology. And then I just want to thank everyone again for joining us and hope that you enjoy the rest of your evening.